Robert Anderson didn't anticipate anything out of the usual that Thursday morning. He was just another millionaire behind the wheel of his black Mercedes, crawling through downtown traffic on Fifth Avenue with a lukewarm cup in one hand and fatigue bearing down on his chest. 4 days had passed since his daughter, Sophie, disappeared. No note, no struggle marks, no messages, only silence, the sort that fills every nook of a house like a specter. He hadn't slept more than a few hours straight, and each morning began the same way. Bloodshot eyes, clenched jaw, suit immaculately pressed because being busy was the only thing keeping him from collapse. He just kept thinking she'd call or walk in the door, or that maybe this was all one awful misunderstanding. But hours just went by, and the world kept going, and Sophie was still gone. Then, in the middle of that slink through the city, something shook him out of the haze. A kid, no more than 11 or 12, ran between the halted cars, dodging with smooth precision, carrying a mini plastic tray of candy in his hand. He had dark skin, a gaunt build, and a hoodie that was 3 sizes too large. Street children were not rare here. But the thing that had grabbed Robert's notice wasn't the kid's hustle, it was the necklace. Dangling suspended above his chest, swaying with every step, was a silver chain and a butterfly. Pendant thin, shining in the sunlights. Robert's heart stopped. He recognized that necklace. He had created it himself, on the back of which Sophie's initials had been engraved. A gift during Christmas. Unique. There could not be. There was no way. Another one of them. It was Sophie's. The coffee was dropped from Robert's hand, seeping into his pants, but he didn't notice. He flung open his door so quickly that it swung wide into the neighboring lane, horns honking as he stepped off into traffic, gaze fixed on the boy. Hey, kid, he yelled, his voice cracking. But when their eyes met, the boy's instincts took over. He ran. Robert ran after him, suit jacket flapping, shiny shoes thudding pavement. He could hear drivers yelling, but he didn't care. He hardly knew he was stepping onto the ground. The kid slipped into an alleyway between a bakery and a pawn shop, and Robert ran after him blindly, almost sliding on an oil slick. The alleyway curved left, then right, then opened onto a cluttered rear lot behind an automobile garage. Robert was 7 years old and hadn't sprinted like that in years, but adrenaline carried him. The boy scaled a short, chain-link fence with ease, and Robert, breath burning in his chest, scrambled over after him, tearing his sleeve. Wait. I'm not trying to hurt you, he gasped, voice hoarse. But the kid continued running, through another alley, across a broken parking lot, down a side street filled with people. Robert stumbled behind him, almost falling over a woman's dog leash, paying no attention to the pain running up his calf. Just when he figured he had lost him, the kid darted through an empty lot behind an old church, and at last, thankfully, ceased. He turned, puffing eyes wide with fear. Robert came to a stop, palms up. I don't want to frighten you, he told him, speaking softly, trembling from the race and what he was going to request. I just need to know, where did you acquire that necklace? The boy instinctively wrapped his fingers around it. I didn't steal it, he yelled out before Robert could speak again. I swear I didn't. A girl gave it to me. Robert caught his breath. A girl. Yeah, the boy replied, his voice shaking now. She was hurt. She was hiding. She said to take this and find her dad. She told him her name was Robert. The world came to a halt. Robert took a stumbling step back. Her name was Sophie. The boy nodded slowly, gravely. She's alive, he whispered, but she's not fine. Robert didn't know where the energy came from as he ran through beeping cars, dodging agile pedestrians, his chest gasping and legs aflame, but something animalistic had overtaken. He didn't see the city anymore, just the necklace, just the boy. It was like every cell in his body was screaming that he had to catch him, because if what he saw around that boy's neck was what he suspected it was, then Sophie wasn't gone. Not yet. He pursued the boy down a shadowy alley where sunlight struggled to penetrate, a reek of rusty garbage and motor oil hanging heavy. His shiny shoes clattered on shattered concrete, skipping puddles and shredded paper bags. The boy cut sharply to the left behind a line of dumpsters and froze, trapped by a wall too tall to climb. Chest felt for air. Robert slid to a stop, raising both arms to indicate he was no threat. Wait, please, he gasped between breaths. But the boy got in a word first, his tone shrill with terror. I didn't take it, he yelled, retreating, one hand holding the pendant close as if preparing for combat. I promise, I took nothing. Robert, his breath caught in his throat, slowly shook his head. I believe you, he said as softly as he could possibly do. His heart was pounding, his shirt dripping with sweat, but his words came out calmly. I'm not accusing you. That necklace, it was my daughter's. The boy blinked, bewildered, unsure. His hand fell an inch, just enough for Robert to catch a glimpse of the familiar glint again. That butterfly pendant, made to order, not mass market. She's missing, Robert continued, voice now barely above a whisper. Her name was Sophie. Something changed in the boy's face. His jaw relaxed and his eyes, wide and wary, relaxed a little. Her name was Sophie, he asked slowly, voice cracking. Robert nodded, yes. And then the words that Robert's whole life was turned upside down by. I found her, said the boy, softly, as if he wasn't certain it was safe to say what was true out loud. 3 days ago, in the Bronx, in one of those old buildings that nobody stays in anymore. She was hurt pretty bad, could hardly walk, told her she didn't trust anyone but her father. Robert's knees almost buckled. He leaned against the wall next to him for support. The Bronx, 3 days ago. He had been on the other side of town, talking to detectives, making flyers, attempting to think like a father and not a broken man. She's alive, he demanded, his voice shaking, near, childlike in its begging. The boy nodded slowly. She's injured, afraid, but yeah, she lives. A surge of warmth crashed through Robert's chest as if hope and fear had met simultaneously. Tears pricked at his eyes before he could banish them. The boy continued to talk, his voice trembling. She didn't say much to me, only her name and that if something went wrong, I was to seek out a man named Robert Anderson, that you. Robert hardly spoke, only nodded. She said to give you this, the boy continued, holding out the pendant as though it were made of glass. She said you'd know it was real. Robert reached out with trembling fingers, taking the necklace, his thumb brushing over the tiny butterfly, and then to the back where Sophie's initials were etched, along with a date only the two of them would ever understand. Christmas morning, the last time he saw her smile. He clutched the necklace tightly in his fist, not caring that his knuckles had gone white. Your name is, he inquired, his voice a rough rasp. Micah, the boy answered, his eyes cast downward at his scuffed shoes. I sleep by the train yard, typically sell candy to make ends meet. I wasn't even in that area of the Bronx to begin with, but I was hungry, and I spotted her. Thought she was dead first. Robert swallowed hard, and you saved her. Micah nodded again, gave her my blanket, some of my snacks. She didn't want the police. Said they might not believe her. She was afraid of someone. I don't know who. She asked me to find you, but I didn't know where to begin. Undefined, he just kept going everywhere, hoping maybe you'd notice me. Robert fell to one knee, no longer able to keep the feeling hidden. He sensed something breaking open in him, not pain this time, but something more incisive, burning, desperate hope. You did well, Micah. You did something no one else could. And while his head reeled, heart pounding with questions what had happened to her, who had done this to her? Who had done this to her? Why hadn't she reported it to the police? One thing stood out. This boy had just broken open a door Robert believed was forever closed. Sophie was alive. Hurt, yes. Hiding. Afraid. But alive. And now, nothing was going to prevent him from taking her home. The boy had introduced himself as Marcus after they had both recovered from their breathless exertions, and for all that Robert had endured in the last few days, he felt softly appreciative of this toughened, wiry kid who dared to pursue hope where other people had lost it. They rode the subway uptown together towards the Bronx. Robert, in his press suit, sat uncomfortably next to the boy on a fissured plastic bench, the sound of the train rumbling and brakes screeching intermittently breaking the silence between them. Marcus, adjusting the frayed edge of his shirt, eventually spoke up. She was bound up when I found her, he said quietly, eyes cast down at the subway floor. She couldn't even hold her head straight, had bruises on her arms, and her lip was cut. She could hardly muster the energy to speak, but she continued to whisper, one word again and again. Uncle David. The words hit Robert like a punch to the stomach. He slowly turned, squinting at the boy, not sure he'd heard correctly. David Mitchell, he asked, already knowing but not able to help himself. Yeah, Marcus nodded, apparently oblivious to the seriousness of the name. She said Uncle David instructed some individuals to keep her quiet until things blew over. She was sobbing. Mentioned she heard him screaming on the phone about contracts, money, and how you were getting too close to discovering something. Robert's head spun, recollections flashing back like pieces of shattered glass. David Coe, coordinating the private eyes, assuring him each evening that Sophie had most likely just fled, telling him not to report her to the police yet since the press would love it. David was a friend more than that. He was Robert's business partner, godfather to Sophie, a man who had witnessed every milestone in Robert's life. Birthdays, weddings, funerals, and he was somehow entwined in this. She said that he was afraid she'd speak, Marcus went on. That if she spoke to anyone, something would happen to you. Robert couldn't respond. He sat back against the subway wall, the overhead lights flickering as they passed through a tunnel, making the space feel even colder. His chest tightened as he remembered a conversation just 2 weeks earlier, when David had laughed off an accounting error Robert found in one of their shared investments. Nothing serious, he'd said. Let it go. We'll fix it quietly. And Robert had, because that's what trust does. It blinded you, made you question your gut. But now, the pieces had clicked into place. Sophie had heard something. Something that could blow their business wide open. And instead of keeping her safe, David had attempted to bury it. Literally. The betrayal cut like a knife in his belly. Marcus stared up at him. I didn't know what to do. She told me not to tell anyone, but she needed assistance. I didn't know if I could trust anybody, but I figured if I showed you the necklace and you were really her dad, maybe you'd believe me, he said. Robert instinctively laid a firm hand on Marcus's shoulder, steadying his voice. You did the right thing, son. You did what grown men couldn't. As they pulled into the next stop, Robert gazed out of the train window, the city a blur, his reflection watching back, tired, rumpled, haunted. But beneath it, something else was building: anger. Not the raging kind, but the subtle, contained kind that comes when someone you trusted with your life turns that trust around and uses it as a bludgeon. He considered. Sophie, his clever, inquiring girl, bound and shaken, whispering for her father, while a man she referred to as uncle was scheming to shut her up. This betrayal was personal because it was. It was not merely a matter of business transactions and agreements. It was about blood, about love, about a boundary no respectable man ever crosses. The train slowed, jolting to a halt. Marcus stood, about a couple blocks from here. She's in the basement of an old building right next to an auto repair shop. I locked the door behind me when I was leaving. Thought it'd be more secure. Robert nodded, accompanying him out onto the street, his pulse pounding in his ears. The city reeked of exhaust and French fries, life going on as if nothing had occurred. But within Robert, things had altered. The blinders were off. The image was clear now. David Mitchell hadn't betrayed a friend, she'd betrayed a child, and that made him dangerous. As they dodged through alleys and shattered sidewalks, Robert's mind ran ahead. What else had David lied about? Had he hired someone to keep Sophie in the shadows? Did he think he could kill her for good? But most of all, why? What was the secret worth that much risk? He didn't know yet, but one thing was sure. David had underestimated what a father would do for his daughter, and that error was going to cost him. Answer: when they arrived at the basement of the old dilapidated building, Robert's breath stopped in his throat. The faint glow of a shattered bulb blinked overhead, casting long, uncertain shadows on the concrete walls, and in the distant corner, on a ripped mattress thrown over cardboard and frayed blankets, was his daughter. Sophie. She was hardly recognizable. Dirt smudged her face, hair matted and tangled, lips dry and cracked. But those eyes, his little girl's eyes, widened as she saw him. "Daddy," she rasped, her voice hoarse and small, like it hadn't been used in days. Robert dropped to his knees, pulling her into his arms so gently it was as if she might break. She trembled as he held her, his own tears soaking into her hair. "You're safe now, sweetheart," he whispered, rocking her slightly, the sheer relief washing over him like a flood. For an eternity, they stood alone together, suspended in that tenuous sphere of reconciliation. And then Marcus dropped to the floor beside them, his tone even, though the weight was heavier now. "There's more," he said, looking toward the narrow stairway as if an eavesdropper might lurk there. "I didn't mention it before, but I overheard David outside this building 3 nights ago. I was hiding behind the dumpster." Robert scowled at him. "Talking to whom?" "Some guy. Older. Suit, gold watch. Had a black car pulled up down the street. They were fighting," Marcus told him. His eyes direct on Robert now. "But not with Sophie. With you." Robert hugged his daughter closer to him as his heart fell all over again. "What did they say?" The man asked if it was done. David said, "Almost. He's too distracted looking for the girl to notice what we're pulling from the accounts." Then the man told him to hurry up, said the news cycle wouldn't protect him forever, and if anyone found out, it'd ruin more than just your name. Robert's mind spun. A politician. That's what Marcus had described. A person who had to remain pure, but was happy to employ David's plan to soil Robert's reputation without getting their own hands dirty. Robert realized now, Sophie's abduction hadn't been a desperate ploy or an act of betrayal. It had been orchestrated, calculatingly, strategically, like an intellectual game. take the daughter, stall the father, drain his company of money while he's too shattered to see it, and then allow the scandal break naturally, making David appear to be the one who attempted to make things right, perhaps even become the business's new face. The idea made Robert ill. He glanced down at Sophie. She glared up at him now, hardly able to speak, but her tiny hand held his hard, as if pleading with him to make everything okay. And that was the moment he made up his mind. No more private investigators, no more press releases, no more middlemen screening his anguish through paper. He could not trust any of them, not when someone this close had already betrayed him. Instead, he called someone who had not forgotten who she was, Elena Ramirez, a lawyer, shrewd, sharp, and merciless in court. She hadn't climbed to power with backslaps and with favors. She'd fought every step of the way out of these same streets. They had attended college together, and although they'd lost touch over the years, Robert recalled her words once in a debate. "I don't hate money, I just hate the people who use it to silence others." So he called her, told her everything. And when she showed up at the basement an hour later, dressed in jeans, windbreaker, and no makeup, she did not gasp or weep. She merely looked at Sophie and whispered softly, "They messed with the wrong girl." And then she turned to Marcus and nodded respectfully. "You're the witness now. We protect you first." With Elena, Robert regained something he hadn't had for days. Control. She understood exactly how operators such as David worked, understood how to trace the money trail without leaving fingerprints. She instructed him not to go public first. "If we move too quickly, they will bury evidence before we even blink. But if we move quietly," she said, "if we move cleverly, we can cut them out from within and keep them from squirming free." Robert concurred, and in that moment, something within him shifted. The loss, the betrayal, did not disappear, but it firmed into something hard: determination. David thought he'd crushed him, but he hadn't expected Marcus, a kid on the street nobody paid attention to. He hadn't expected Sophie to live long enough to tell him the truth. And he hadn't expected Robert to be the sort of man, when the clouds of heartbreak had lifted, to emerge not with vengeance but with intent. The three of them, Robert, Marcus, and Elena, formed something the enemy did not anticipate, a unit with nothing left to lose, and a revelation so deadly it could bring down anyone who believed they were above the law. The strategy was straightforward. Unobtrusive probing, unobtrusive gathering of proof, no bombast, just piercing accuracy. Undefined, they would reveal the accounts, document the phone calls, track the transfers. Undefined, and when the moment arrived, Robert would come forward not as a shattered father, but as a man who'd returned from the brink. Undefined, and he would not be alone. And sometimes the ones we rely on the most are the very ones who hurt us the hardest. And in that moment, it's so easy to lose our way or feel alone. But even in the darkness of betrayal, an inner strength can emerge quietly, out of nowhere. A street kid who owns nothing. A father with nothing but hope left. A daughter who never lost faith. We all have those times when trust is broken and the future seems unclear. But this tale reminds us, truth will find its way into the light, particularly when accompanied by kindness, by courage, and by second chances. And sometimes it's not about being the loudest in the room, it's about listening hardest, acting from the heart, and believing that even the tiniest thing can make all the difference. Breathe in, hug your loved ones a little tighter, and never forget what truly counts.